Queen Zura of the Kilarian Empire stood at the towering crystalline windows of the royal palace, her gaze fixed on the bleak horizon of Zolaris. 10 years had passed since the devastating war with the Human Alliance had ended, yet the scars remained everywhere. In the cracked facade of the once magnificent palace gates, in the diminished splendor of the capital city below, and most deeply in her own heart. The royal chambers echoed with emptiness. Though adorned with precious metals and rare artifacts from 100 conquered worlds, they had lost their luster since that fateful day a decade ago, when news arrived that Princess Lynthia's fleet had been destroyed in the Ceres Nebula. Zara's only daughter, her heir, her legacy, gone in a blaze of human weaponry. Your Majesty, the voice of Commander Telvok, head of the Royal Guard, interrupted her contemplation. His usually stoic demeanor was unsettled, his outer membrane flickering with the purple hue of agitation. "What is it, Commander?" Zara asked, not turning from the window. The weight of her ceremonial crown and the royal armor she insisted on wearing daily, even a decade after active combat had ceased, seemed particularly heavy today. "There is a situation, Your Majesty. A ship has breached our outer defenses." This caught her attention. Zara turned, her silver eyes narrowing. "Human? No, Your Majesty. It bears Kilarian royal identification codes. Outdated, but authentic." "Impossible," she said, her voice sharp as the ceremonial daggers at her waist. "All royal vessels are accounted for." Telvok's membrane pulsed with deeper purple. "That's not all, Your Majesty. The pilot has made contact. She claims to be Princess Lynthia." The words hung in the air between them, like suspended shards of glass. Zara felt her heart constrict in her chest, a physical pain she had not experienced since the day she received news of her daughter's death. "Where?" It was all she could manage to say. "The ship has landed in the restricted military zone in the southern quadrant." Against direct orders, Zara moved with sudden purpose, her royal robe sweeping behind her as she strode toward the door. "Assemble my personal guard. We leave immediately." "Your Majesty," Telvok began, hesitation evident in his tone. "Should we not proceed with caution? This could be a human trap, an infiltration attempt using stolen codes." "I said we leave immediately." Her voice was ice, brooking no further discussion. Within minutes, the royal transport was cutting through the atmosphere of Zolaris, descending toward the restricted zone. From the viewport, Zara could see the ship that had caused such commotion, a battered Kilarian vessel, its hull scarred with impact marks and what appeared to be crude patch repairs. As her transport landed, Zara felt an unfamiliar sensation, uncertainty. For a decade, she had been certain of her daughter's death, had mourned her, had hardened her heart against the humans who took Lynthia from her. What if this was merely a cruel deception? The Royal Guard formed a protective formation around her as the hatch of the mysterious vessel began to open with a hydraulic hiss. Zara's hand moved instinctively to her ceremonial blade. Not so ceremonial, in fact, as it had tasted the blood of her enemies in the war. A figure emerged from the shadow of the hatch. At first glance, it could have been any Kilarian female, tall, with the characteristic iridescent skin and elongated limbs of their species. But as she stepped fully into the light, Zara felt her breath catch. The figure wore the tattered remains of royal combat armor, modified with unfamiliar technology. Parts of her natural exoskeleton had been replaced with cybernetic components, some bearing the unmistakable design elements of human engineering. But beneath these alterations, there was no mistaking the face, the eyes, the stance. It was Lynthia. "Mother," the figure said, her voice carrying the distinct harmonic resonance of Kilarian royalty. Before Zara could respond, a second figure emerged from the ship. A human male, tall by their standards, with dark hair streaked with gray and a face bearing the marks of hard years. He wore a modified version of what appeared to be a human military uniform, with Kilarian symbols incorporated into the design. The guards immediately raised their weapons, but Zara held up a hand to stay them. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice betraying none of the emotional turmoil within her. "Who are you?" to wear my daughter's face and bring a human to sacred Kilarian soil. I am Lynthia, the female insisted, taking a step forward. Daughter of Zara, heir to the Kilarian throne, commander of the 7th Fleet. She reached into a compartment in her modified armor and withdrew a small object, a royal insignia, the personal crest of the princess. And this, she continued, gesturing to the human beside her, is Marcus Vale, my husband. Whispers rippled through the royal guard. Commander Telvok's hand tightened on his weapon. Zara felt as though the ground beneath her had suddenly disappeared. Husband. The word was foreign, disgusting on her tongue. We have come with information vital to the Empire, Lynthia continued, her stance defiant, so familiar to Zara. The same stubborn posture she had shown as a young princess in training. There are forces at work that orchestrated the war between our peoples, forces that benefit from our continued distrust and isolation. Silence. Zara's command echoed across the landing pad. You will both be taken into custody for questioning. If you are indeed Lynthia, there will be ways to verify it. If not, she left the threat hanging in the air. The human, Marcus, spoke for the first time, his voice deep and surprisingly fluent in the complex Kilarian language. Your Majesty, I understand your suspicion, but we've risked everything to bring this information to you. The same people who arranged for Lynthia's fleet to be ambushed are planning to reignite the conflict. We don't have time for prolonged diplomatic processes. You dare speak to me directly, human? Zara's voice was deadly quiet. After what your kind did to our colonies, to my daughter's fleet, Mother, Lynthia interjected, Marcus saved my life. When my command vessel was hit, he was part of a human special forces team sent to capture high-value targets. Instead of taking me prisoner, he helped me escape when he realized the attack didn't match official human alliance battle plans. We spent 10 years gathering evidence, hiding in the border worlds, following leads. Zara studied the pair before her, mind racing. If this was truly Lynthia, why return now? With a human, no less. And if it was an imposter, what game were they playing? You will both come to the palace, she finally declared. Under guard, your vessel will be impounded and examined. And you, she fixed Marcus with a cold stare, will be kept separate from her until we determine the truth. Mother, no, Lynthia began, but Marcus placed a restraining hand on her arm. It's okay, he said quietly. This is better than we expected. At least we're being heard. As they were escorted to separate transports, Zara caught a glimpse of something that shook her to her core. The way Lynthia looked at the human, with the same fierce protectiveness that Zara herself had once shown toward her daughter. If this was truly Lynthia, she had found something Zara never expected, a bond with one of their most hated enemies. The royal transport lifted off, carrying a queen whose certainties had been shattered in the space of a few moments, leaving her with nothing but questions and the dangerous spark of something she had not allowed herself to feel in a decade: hope. The Grand Hall of the Kilarian Palace had once hosted diplomatic gatherings from 100 different species. Now it stood silent and austere, a symbol of the Empire's isolation in the wake of the devastating war. As Queen Zara entered, flanked by her personal guard, the assembled ministers and nobles bowed low, their iridescent membranes flickering with curiosity and tension. She had summoned only her most trusted advisors for this initial meeting, though trusted was perhaps too strong a word in these times. 10 years of peace had bred its own kind of politics, with factions forming and power struggles emerging from the ashes of war. The supposed Princess Lynthia had been taken to the royal medical chambers for examination and verification of her identity, while the human, Marcus Vale, was held in a secure diplomatic quarter, comfortable but heavily guarded. Rise, Zara commanded, taking her seat on the obsidian throne. Its edges were still rough where it had been repaired after the palace bombing in the final days of the war. She had refused to have it replaced or fully restored, preferring this reminder of vulnerability. Your Majesty, began High Minister Everick, his membrane pulsing with the formal blue of court address. We await your instructions regarding the situation. The situation, Zara repeated coolly, is that someone claiming to be my daughter has returned after a decade, accompanied by a human, bearing wild claims of conspiracy. Initial genetic scans are confirming her identity, Your Majesty, said court physician Nala, her voice carrying the harmonics of scientific precision. The base genetic pattern matches Princess Lynthia's archived sample. However, there are anomalies. Explain, Zara demanded. Extensive cybernetic modifications, some using technology we don't recognize, and genetic alterations we believe were necessary to interface with the cybernetics. Ambassador Scarith, representative of the outer colonies and known for his hawkish stance toward humans, stepped forward. Your Majesty, even if this is genetically Princess Lynthia, we must consider the possibility of mental manipulation. The humans are known to have advanced in neural reprogramming during the war. We have no evidence of such capabilities, countered Military Intelligence Director Karev, his membrane rippling with irritation. This sounds like the same kind of rumor-mongering that escalated tensions before the war. And how would you explain a Kularian royal, if she is indeed royal, returning with a human mate? Scarith's use of the derogatory term for interspecies pairing set off a wave of murmurs among the assembled officials. Zara raised a hand, silencing the room. Weather vessel, what have we learned? It is indeed a modified Royal Scout ship, Your Majesty, reported Fleet Commander Isaac. One of the vessels reported destroyed in the ambush that claimed Princess Lynthia's life. The identification codes are authentic, though the ship itself has been heavily altered with both Kularian and human technology. And their claims of conspiracy? Zara's voice betrayed nothing of her inner turmoil. Director Karev shifted uncomfortably. We have only begun to analyze the data they brought, Your Majesty. It is extensive and encrypted in a complex manner that suggests it was meant to resist both human and Kularian intelligence services. Zara stood suddenly, causing the assembled advisors to step back in surprise. I will speak with her. Alone. Your Majesty, Scarith protested. Protocol demands. I am your queen. Zara cut him off, her voice like a blade. And she claims to be my daughter. There will be no further discussion. The medical chamber was stark and clinical, a sharp contrast to the ornate formality of the rest of the palace. Lynthia, or the being claiming to be Lynthia, sat on the edge of an examination table, her posture tense but dignified. The tattered royal armor had been removed, revealing the full extent of her cybernetic modifications. An arm completely replaced from the elbow, neural interfaces visible at the base of her skull, and what appeared to be reinforced exoskeletal plating along her left side. When Zara entered, dismissing the medical staff with a gesture, Lynthia stood, then hesitated, as if unsure whether to bow or embrace her mother. Sit, Zara said, her tone softer than she had intended. Lynthia complied, watching as her mother circled the room, examining readouts on the medical monitors. The physicians confirm your genetic identity, Zara finally said, still not looking directly at her. But they cannot account for all that has been done to you. Survival required adaptation, Lynthia replied. The cybernetics were necessary after the injuries I sustained in the ambush. Human technology. Yes. Lynthia did not flinch from the accusation in her mother's tone. Marcus has connections in the human medical underground. They had access to technologies our physicians don't. Zara finally turned to face her daughter fully. Why did you not return sooner? 10 years, Lynthia. 10 years I mourned you. We couldn't return until we had proof. Coming back with just a story and a human husband would have been... She trailed off. Suicidal. Zara finished for her. I was going to say ineffective. Lynthia countered with a hint of the old defiance Zara remembered so well. The conspiracy we uncovered goes deep, Mother. There are people in both governments who have been working to ensure our species remain enemies. What people? What conspiracy? Zara demanded, moving closer, searching her daughter's face for any sign of deception. A conglomerate called Orbitech. They present themselves as a neutral interstellar development corporation, but they're actually controlled by a council representing several technically neutral species. They orchestrated key events leading to the war, including the ambush that supposedly killed me. Lynthia's voice was steady, but her membrane flickered with the amber hues of righteous anger. For what purpose? Resources. Control. The war devastated both our territories, left our borders vulnerable. In the aftermath, Orbitech subsidiaries have secured exclusive mining and development rights in disputed zones. They've been extracting billions in resources while our peoples focus on rebuilding and maintaining our military standoff. Zara's mind raced. It sounded fantastical, yet also disturbingly plausible. The economic patterns after the war had been strange. Certain sectors recovering too quickly, others remaining mysteriously stagnant despite investment. And your evidence? Data trails, communication intercepts, financial transactions, testimony from defectors. Most damning of all, we have the original orders for the ambush that targeted my fleet. Orders that didn't come from the Human Alliance command structure, but were inserted using high-level authentication codes traced back to Orbitech subsidiaries. Zara was silent for a long moment. Then, in the human, Marcus, what is he to? You truly... Lynthia's membrane shifted to the deep violet of absolute certainty, a color Zara knew well from her own reflection. He is my husband, my partner, the one who believed me when I told him something wasn't right about the war. He gave up everything, his career, his homeworld, his safety, to help me find the truth. A human and a Keylarian. Zara's voice carried centuries of cultural prohibition. It is forbidden. So, is orchestrating a war that killed millions on both sides? Lynthia shot back. Mother, I know this is difficult, but Marcus and I represent what's possible, cooperation between our species. The very thing Orbitech and their allies fear most. Before Zara could respond, an urgent signal sounded from her communication device. She activated it to see Commander Telvok's face, his membrane flashing the red of emergency. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. There's been an incident in the diplomatic wing. The human, he's gone. Lynthia was on her feet instantly. What happened? Is he hurt? Telvok's eyes shifted to her, then back to the queen. No, princess. He overpowered his guards and escaped. We have the palace on lockdown, but... He wouldn't escape. Lynthia interrupted, her voice certain. Not unless he was in danger. Zara studied her daughter's face, seeing genuine fear there. Continue the search, Commander, but I want him taken alive and unharmed. As she closed the communication, Lynthia stepped closer. Mother, please, let me help find him. Something is wrong. Marcus wouldn't jeopardize our mission unless someone forced his hand. Zara hesitated, centuries of protocol and prejudice warring with the urgency in her daughter's voice. You claim conspirators exist within my court. Who? We suspect Ambassador Scareth has ties to Orbitech, though we haven't confirmed it. There are others we're less certain of. Scareth. The ambassador had been particularly vocal about maintaining aggressive postures toward humans in recent years, blocking several tentative diplomatic initiatives. Very well, Zara decided. You will accompany me under guard. If this Marcus is as important to our security as you claim, we must find him before others do. As they hurried from the medical chambers, Zara cast a sideways glance at the woman beside her, so familiar, yet so changed. The daughter she had lost and mourned, now returned with impossible claims and a human mate. Zara had built her reign on certainty and strength, but now found herself navigating a maze of doubts, with the fate of her empire possibly hanging in the balance. And beneath it all, a question she dared not voice even to herself. If Lynthia spoke the truth, how many had died in a war manufactured for profit? And what responsibility did Zara bear for never questioning the convenient narratives that had led her people to battle? The Royal Security Center buzzed with frantic activity as officers tracked movement throughout the palace complex. Massive holographic displays showed the labyrinthine structure from multiple angles, with red indicators marking security teams in pursuit of the escaped human. He's avoiding the main corridors, Commander Telvok observed, his membrane flickering with professional assessment as he studied the displays. Moving through maintenance passages. He knows the palace layout. Impossible, one of the security officers objected. Those schematics are classified. Not impossible if someone provided them, Lynthia countered, her eyes never leaving the displays. Marcus is resourceful, but he couldn't navigate this maze without help. Queen Zara stood silently, watching the pursuit unfold while her mind processed the implications. If Lynthia's claims of conspiracy reached to her own court, then Marcus's escape might not be what it seemed. There, an officer pointed to a flashing indicator. Service Tunnel B7, moving toward the Central Archives. The archives? Zara's attention sharpened. Why would he go there? Lynthia's expression changed to one of sudden understanding. The data core. Our evidence. It's encrypted with a biometric key that requires both of us to unlock. He must think someone is trying to destroy it before we can present it. Or he's attempting to access sensitive information, Ambassador Scareth suggested as he entered the security center, flanked by his personal guards. Your Majesty, forgive my intrusion, but when I heard of the human's escape, I came immediately. This confirms my concerns about bringing a human operative into the palace. Zara noted the way Lynthia's posture stiffened at Scareth's arrival, her cybernetic hand flexing subtly, a warrior's instinct to reach for a weapon. Ambassador, Zara acknowledged coolly, your concern is noted, but I do not recall summoning you to security operations. Before Scareth could respond, a new alert sounded. One of the officers looked up with alarm. Your Majesty, we have unauthorized access to the Royal Communication Array. Someone is attempting to transmit a large data package off-world. Block it, Telvok ordered immediately. We can't, sir. The transmission is using royal override codes. All eyes turned to Lynthia, who shook her head. Not me, but my old codes might have been stored in the ship's computer. If someone extracted them, trace the transmission origin, Zara commanded. The officer worked frantically at his console. East Wing, Tertiary Communication Hub. But that's nowhere near the archives where we detected the human. Lynthia's eyes narrowed. It's a diversion. Marcus isn't trying to transmit anything. Someone else is. Someone who wants to make it look like we're the threat. Zara made a swift decision. Commander Telvok, take your best team to the archives. Find the human, but do not harm him. I want answers, not a corpse. And the transmission, Your Majesty, the communications officer asked urgently. Let it proceed, but tag it with a tracer. I want to know its destination. She turned to Lynthia. You said you have evidence. What form? A data crystal, currently secured in a hidden compartment on our ship. The encryption is complex, designed to prevent tampering. And yet someone is transmitting data using royal codes, Scareth interjected, his tone insinuating. Not our data, Lynthia insisted. Our evidence remains secured. Whatever's being transmitted, it's something else. A new alert sounded, and one of the security officers called out. Physical altercation detected in the archives. Security feed showing now. The main display switched to show a grainy security image of the Central Archives. Marcus Vale was engaged in combat with two Keylarian security officers, his human physiology at disadvantage against their superior strength and natural armor. Yet he moved with the practiced efficiency of Special Forces training. But it was the third figure that drew gasps from everyone in the room. A second human, wearing the uniform of a palace servant, attempting to access a secured terminal while Marcus fought to stop them. Another human? Impossible, Scareth exclaimed. Our security protocols. Silence, Zara commanded, her eyes fixed on the scene. Enhance image on the second human. The display zoomed and clarified, revealing details of the second human's face and the distinctive tattoo visible at their neckline. Lynthia inhaled sharply. That's a Remex guild mark. Mother, the Remex are one of the primary contractors for Orbitech. They specialize in infiltration and data theft. Zara turned to her security chief. Full lockdown. No one enters or leaves the palace. And deploy royal guards to the archive immediately. She faced Scareth, whose membrane had taken on the gray pallor of anxiety. Ambassador, you seem concerned. Perhaps you have insights into how a Remex operative infiltrated my palace staff. I am as shocked as you, Your Majesty, Scareth stammered, his usual eloquence deserting him. This is clearly part of a complex human plot. Humans don't use Remex, Lynthia interrupted. They're strictly mercenary, and they're known to work primarily with non-human clients, including, according to our evidence, certain Kilarian officials with connections to Orbitech. Before Scareth could respond, the security feed showed Marcus gaining the upper hand against one guard, using the Kilarian's own momentum to throw him into his companion. He lunged for the Remex operative, but the infiltrator drew a weapon, a neural disruptor, illegal in both human and Kilarian space. Marcus! Lynthia cried out as the human was hit with the disruptor's beam, his body convulsing before collapsing to the floor. The Remex turned back to the terminal, fingers flying over the interface, clearly racing to complete whatever task had brought them to the archives. Then, suddenly, they stiffened and fell forward, revealing Commander Telvok standing behind them, his stunned baton still crackling with energy. Command Center, Telvok's voice came through the communication system. Area secured. One human prisoner down, but alive, Remex operative neutralized, request medical team for the human. Lynthia turned to her mother, eyes blazing. Now, what do you believe us? The Remex wouldn't be here unless someone high in your government brought them in. Queen Zara's expression had hardened into a mask of royal fury. With deliberate movements, she turned to face Ambassador Scareth, who had begun edging toward the exit. Restrain the ambassador, she ordered, her voice deadly calm, and prepare the Great Hall. It appears we need to have a very public discussion about treason. Scareth's membrane turned ashen. Your Majesty, this is a misunderstanding. I have served the Empire loyally. Save your protest for the inquiry, Ambassador. Zara's tone permitted no argument. Commander Telvok, secure the Remex operative and the evidence they were attempting to access or destroy, and ensure that Marcus Vale receives proper medical attention. She paused, then added, he is, after all, apparently family. Lynthia's membrane flushed with surprise at this last statement. Not acceptance, perhaps, but acknowledgement. It was, she realized, far more than she had dared hope for on their return. As the royal guards surrounded Scareth, Zara placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, the first physical contact between them since Lynthia's return. It seems, daughter, that we have much to discuss about the past and about the future of our empire. The Great Hall of the Kilarian Palace had not seen such an assembly in over a decade. Arrayed in concentric tiers, the highest nobles, military leaders, and governing ministers of the empire watched in stunned silence as Queen Zara presided over what had rapidly evolved from security inquiry into a trial for treason. At the center of the hall stood Ambassador Scareth, his membrane fluctuating between the sickly gray of fear and the defiant red of cornered aggression. Beside him, secured in a containment field, was the captured Remex operative, their human form incongruous among the towering Kilarians. Princess Lynthia stood at her mother's right hand, her posture formal despite the exhaustion evident in her bearing. And beside her, still showing effects from the neural disruptor but standing unaided, was Marcus Vale, the first human to be permitted in the Great Hall since before the war. The evidence is irrefutable, Director Karev of Military Intelligence was saying, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. The Remex operative has provided confirmation that they were employed by Orbitech through a series of shell corporations, with Ambassador Scareth serving as their primary contact within the Kilarian government. Murmurs rippled through the assembled dignitaries. Scareth's membrane flared with indignation. These are the confessions of a mercenary facing execution. They would say anything to save their skin. The confession is corroborated by data recovered from their neural implants, Karev continued impassively, as well as by the financial records presented by Princess Lynthia and Marcus Vale. The trail of payments from Orbitech subsidiaries to your private accounts is particularly damning, Ambassador. This is a fabrication. Scareth turned desperately to face the Queen. Your Majesty, I have served the Empire faithfully for decades. These humans and their sympathizers are attempting to divide us, to weaken our resolve against our enemies." Queen Zara remained silent, her expression unreadable as she gestured for Marcus to step forward. The human moved carefully, still pained from his injuries, but determined. He carried a small data projector, which he activated at the center of the hall. A holographic display blossomed above them, showing complex networks of financial transactions, communications, and operational plans. "What you're seeing," Marcus explained, his voice strong despite his condition, "is the result of 10 years of investigation. These are records of Orbitech's systematic manipulation of both human and Keylarian intelligence services, deliberately provoking incidents that escalated tensions between our species." "He speaks our language too well," a noble from the outer tier called out suspiciously. "How do we know this isn't some elaborate human deception?" "I learned Keylarian from Princess Lynthia," Marcus replied evenly, "just as she learned my language from me. When you spend a decade in hiding together, you have time for language lessons." This brought a few surprised chuckles from the younger members of the assembly, quickly silenced by the glares of their elders. Lynthia stepped forward to join Marcus at the projector. "The most damning evidence concerns the ambush that supposedly claimed my life. This was no human military operation. It was a carefully orchestrated attack by Remex mercenaries using ships disguised with human military signatures." The holographic display shifted to show battle plans and communication logs. "The attack was designed to eliminate me, specifically because I had begun questioning inconsistencies in our intelligence about human activities. Someone didn't want me looking too closely at the justifications for our conflict." "And why would Orbitech want war between our species?" challenged General Morvith, a decorated veteran of the conflict. "What possible benefit could they derive?" "Control of the Helix Corridor," Marcus replied without hesitation. "The disputed territory between our systems contains the richest concentration of rare elements in the sector. With both our governments focused on military spending and recovery, Orbitech's subsidiaries secured exclusive development rights throughout the region. Their profits have tripled since the war." "This is circumstantial," Scarith interjected desperately. "Nothing directly links me to these alleged conspiracies." Zara finally broke. Her silence. "What was the Remex operative doing in our archives, Ambassador?" "The security footage shows them attempting to access classified files using your authorization codes." Scarith's membrane paled. I cannot explain that, Your Majesty. My codes must have been stolen." "Enough." Zara's voice cut through the hall like a blade. "I have heard sufficient evidence to warrant a full tribunal. Ambassador Scarith will be detained pending formal charges of treason against the Empire." As royal guards moved to take Scarith into custody, he made a desperate lunge toward Lynthia, a concealed weapon suddenly appearing in his hand. "You should have stayed dead, Princess." Before he could reach her, Marcus threw himself forward, intercepting the ambassador's attack. Both fell to the floor, grappling for control of the weapon. Despite his injuries and the natural strength advantage of the Keylarian, Marcus managed to twist Scarith's arm, forcing him to drop the blade. Royal guards swarmed forward, separating them and restraining Scarith, who continued to shout accusations and threats as he was dragged from the hall. Marcus rose shakily to his feet, a fresh cut visible on his face where Scarith's natural armor had grazed him. Without thinking, Lynthia moved to his side, supporting him with obvious concern. The gesture was not lost on the assembled dignitaries, nor on Queen Zura, who observed the interaction with an unreadable expression. "This emergency session is adjourned," Zara announced. "The full evidence will be made available to all members of the High Council for review. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss the implications for our relations with Orbitech and with the Human Alliance." As the assembly began to disperse, buzzing with shocked conversations, Zara approached her daughter and Marcus. "That was foolish," she said to the human, though her tone lacked its usual coldness. "You could have been killed intercepting an attack meant for a Keylarian royal." "With respect, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, wincing as he straightened. "Protecting Lynthia isn't foolishness to me. It's as natural as breathing. Zara studied him for a long moment, then nodded almost imperceptibly. You both require rest and medical attention. We will speak again when you have recovered. She turned to leave, then paused. And thank you for protecting my daughter. Again, it seems. As the queen departed, followed by her personal guard, Lynthia and Marcus found themselves momentarily alone in the vast hall. That went better than expected, Marcus murmured, leaning slightly against Lynthia for support. I was prepared for immediate execution, not a thank you. Mother doesn't give praise easily, Lynthia replied, her membrane shifting to the warm gold of affection as she looked at him. But she sees the truth now. About Orbitech, about the war, maybe even about us. One conspiracy exposed, one corrupt ambassador detained, Marcus summarized. Not bad for our first day back from the dead. Lynthia's expression grew more serious. Scarith is just the beginning. The Orbitech tentacles reach deep into both our governments. There will be resistance to what we're proposing. Peace always has its enemies, Marcus agreed. But for the first time in a decade, I feel like we might actually have a fighting chance. As royal medical staff approached to escort them to the healing chambers, Lynthia cast one last look around the great hall, the heart of the empire she had been born to lead, the place she had never expected to see again. For 10 years, she and Marcus had lived as fugitives, gathering evidence, building their case, surviving against impossible odds. Now they stood at the threshold of something even more challenging, rebuilding trust between two species who had spent generations learning to hate one another. The path ahead would not be easy, but as Marcus's hand found hers, human fingers intertwining with Keylarian, Lynthia felt something she had almost forgotten during their long exile. Hope. 3 days after the dramatic confrontation in the Great Hall, Queen Zara stood in the royal gardens, a secluded space rarely visited since the war. Once meticulously maintained to showcase botanical specimens from across the empire, the gardens had been partially neglected during the years of conflict and recovery, with resources diverted to more pressing concerns. Yet there was a wild beauty in their current state. Zalarian flora had reclaimed many of the formal beds, creating a lush tangle that reminded Zara of the wilderness beyond the capital. She had chosen this place deliberately for her private conversation with Lynthia. Away from the court, the ministers, the constant demands of governance, perhaps they could finally speak not just as queen and princess, but as mother and daughter. Lynthia approached along the overgrown path, her cybernetic modifications gleaming in the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy above. She had changed from the tattered armor of her arrival into formal royal attire, modified to accommodate her cybernetics. The effect was striking. Tradition and transformation merged into something new. You wanted to see me, Mother? Lynthia's voice carried the formal tones of court address, but with an undercurrent of uncertainty. Walk with me, Zara said simply, gesturing to the path ahead. They moved in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the soft rustle of vegetation and the distant calls of native avians. Zara noticed how Lynthia's movements had changed, still graceful as all Keylarians were, but with a different rhythm, adapted to compensate for her cybernetic limbs. The council has reviewed all the evidence you and Marcus provided, Zara finally said. It is compelling, disturbing, but compelling. And do they believe it? Lynthia asked directly. Some do. Others require more convincing. Zara paused beside a reflecting pool choked with aquatic growth. Change comes slowly to the empire, Lynthia. You know this. We don't have the luxury of time, Mother. If Orbitech realizes how much we know, they'll accelerate their plans. They've invested too much in keeping our species at each other's throats to give up now. Zara studied her daughter's face, so familiar, yet marked by experiences Zara could barely imagine. You've changed. 10 years believed dead will do that, Lynthia replied with a hint of the dry humor Zara remembered from before. But my loyalty to our people hasn't changed. Everything I've done, everything Marcus and I have risked, has been to protect the empire from those who would manipulate us for profit. And the human? Is he truly your mate? Or Was that a convenient alliance for your mission? Lynthia's membrane shifted to the deep violet of absolute certainty. Marcus is my husband in every way that matters. Our union wasn't recognized by any official authority. Of course, we were fugitives. But we made our vows according to both Cularian and human traditions. Ow! Zara couldn't hide her curiosity. Our physiologies are so different. A small smile touched Lynthia's lips. Love find a way, mother. The cybernetic adaptations help bridge some gaps, but mostly, we learn to appreciate our differences rather than fear them. Isn't that what you taught me about diplomacy? Zara looked away, her gaze settling on a sculpture half buried in climbing vines. I taught you many things before the war. Some of them, I no longer believe. This admission clearly surprised Lynthia. What do you mean? 10 years of mourning provides ample time for reflection, Zara said quietly. I began to question whether our policies of isolation and military preparedness truly served our people. The war cost us millions of lives, depleted our resources, and for what? We gained no territory, no advantage. And now I learn it may all have been orchestrated by corporate interests. She turned back to face her daughter directly. But that is my burden to bear. What I wish to know now is what you propose we do with this information. Lynthia straightened, her posture shifting subtly from daughter to diplomat. We must re-establish direct communication with the Human Alliance. Present our evidence jointly. Identify the corrupt elements in both our governments, and form a united front against Orbitech and their backers. You make it sound simple, Zara observed. The concept is simple. The execution will be challenging. Lynthia gestured to her cybernetic arm. But Marcus and I are living proof that cooperation is possible, that we can overcome centuries of distrust. Zara was silent for a long moment, her royal training keeping her expression neutral despite the tumult of emotions within. Finally, she reached out and did something she had not done since Lynthia's return. She touched her daughter's face, tracing the line of her cheek as she had done when Lynthia was a child. I mourned you, she said simply, her voice barely audible. Every day, for 10 years, I mourned you. Lynthia's membrane rippled with emotion, the formal facade cracking to reveal vulnerability beneath. I'm sorry, Mother. There were times I wanted to contact you, to let you know I was alive. But it would have put you in danger. And now you return, bringing danger with you nonetheless, Zara observed, but there was no accusation in her tone, only a weary acknowledgement of reality. Some dangers cannot be avoided, only confronted, Lynthia replied. Will you help us? Zara withdrew her hand and clasped both of hers behind her back, a return to the formal posture of the Queen. The evidence will be presented to the Human Alliance through secure channels. I will request a direct meeting with their leadership. And while I cannot officially recognize your union with Marcus Vale without creating chaos in the court, I will not oppose it. Lynthia's membrane brightened with surprised hope. That's more than I expected. Do not mistake pragmatism for approval, Zara cautioned, though her tone lacked conviction. This arrangement serves diplomatic purposes in our current crisis. The court will need time to adjust to the concept. Of course, Your Majesty, Lynthia replied, a hint of knowing amusement in her voice. Before Zara could respond, a royal guard appeared on the path, approaching with urgency. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. There's been a development. The human, Marcus Vale, is requesting an urgent audience. He says it concerns Orbitech movements detected near the border. Zara exchanged a quick glance with Lynthia. We will both attend. Bring him to the tactical chamber immediately. As they hurried from the garden's back toward the palace, Zara found herself evaluating Marcus Vale in a new light. Not as an enemy, not merely as her daughter's unlikely mate, but as a potential ally in what might prove to be an even more devastating conflict than the one they had just survived. If Orbitech was willing to engineer one war for profit, they would certainly not hesitate to ignite another. The tactical chamber, deep within the secure heart of the palace, buzzed with activity as Zara and Lynthia entered. Holographic displays showed star charts of the border regions, with pulsing indicators marking ship movements. Marcus stood at the central console, engaged in rapid discussion with Director Karev and several military officers. His presence in this most sensitive of locations would have been unthinkable just days ago, yet the Kularian officers were treating him with cautious respect. "Report," Zara commanded as she took her position at the head of the tactical table. Marcus straightened, shifting smoothly into the bearing of the military professional he had once been. "Your Majesty, our ship's AI continued monitoring Orbitech communication frequencies after our arrival. It's just flagged a significant spike in encrypted transmissions between their regional headquarters and several vessels moving into position along the border." "Troop carriers?" Lynthia asked, moving to stand beside him. "Worse," Marcus replied grimly. "The emission signatures match known Remex stealth vessels. They're positioning for infiltration operations, not direct military engagement." Director Karev's membrane pulsed with concern. If they're deploying Remex agents, they're planning precision strikes, not conventional warfare. Assassinations, sabotage, information warfare. "Exactly," Marcus agreed. "Classic destabilization tactics. Create incidents that appear to be aggression from the other side, provoke retaliation, escalate to full conflict. It's the same playbook they used 10 years ago, just accelerated. They know we've exposed Scarith," Lynthia concluded. "They're moving to their contingency plan." Zara studied the tactical display, her mind racing through scenarios. 10 years ago, she would have immediately ordered fleet deployments, established defensive positions, prepared for war. But now, with everything she had learned, "Open a direct channel to the Human Alliance Command," she ordered, causing every Kularian in the room to stare in shock. "Priority 1, my personal authentication." "Your Majesty," one of the older military commanders protested, "protocol dictates." "Protocol led us into one unnecessary war, Commander. I will not allow it to lead us into another." Zara's tone brooked no argument. "Director Karev, prepare a data package with everything we've learned about Orbitech and the Remex deployments. We're going to share it with the humans." As the communications officers scrambled to establish the unprecedented direct link to their former enemies, Marcus approached Zara, lowering his voice. "Your Majesty, this is the right decision, but you should know many in the Human Alliance leadership will be as resistant to cooperation as your commanders are. The wounds of war are still fresh on both sides." "Then we must ensure they understand the alternative," Zara replied. "Lynthia, you and Marcus will address the human leadership directly. They need to see with their own eyes what cooperation between our species can achieve." Before Lynthia could respond, the main display flickered and resolved into the image of a stern-faced human woman in a military uniform adorned with the insignia of the Human Alliance High Command. "This is Admiral Elaine Chun of the Human Alliance," she announced, her expression carefully neutral. "I must say, receiving a direct communication from Queen Zara herself is unexpected." Zara moved into view of the communication array. "Admiral Chun, I appreciate your willingness to accept this transmission. We have urgent matters to discuss concerning mutual security threats." The Admiral's eyes widened slightly as she spotted Marcus standing beside the Kularian royals. "Is that Commander Vale? We believed you were killed in action a decade ago. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, Admiral," Marcus replied with a hint of a smile. "And I have quite a story to tell you about why those reports were circulated in the first place." For the next hour, the unlikely alliance of Kularian royalty and a human special forces officer presented their evidence to an increasingly disturbed Human Alliance command staff. Data flowed between the former enemies for the first time since before the war, each side confirming and building upon the intelligence gathered by the other. "These Remex deployments match unusual movements we've detected on our side of the border," Admiral Chin finally acknowledged. "We assumed they were Kularian covert operations, just as we assumed similar infiltrations were human operations," Director Karev noted. "Exactly as Orbitech intended. The question now," Zara said, "is what we intend to do about it." Admiral Chan was silent for a moment, her expression grave. "This evidence is compelling, Queen Zara, but I must be frank. Convincing our government to coordinate military operations with the Keylarian Empire will be challenging. The political obstacles are substantial. We face similar challenges, Admiral, Zara acknowledged. Yet the alternative is allowing ourselves to be manipulated into another devastating conflict. Lynthia stepped forward. If I may, Admiral, perhaps we don't need full military coordination immediately. What we need is a joint operation targeting the Remex vessels specifically. A limited objective with clear parameters, preventing the false flag operations before they can begin. Marcus nodded in agreement. A small joint strike team could neutralize the immediate threat while giving both sides time to process the larger implications. I volunteer to serve as liaison. Admiral Chun studied the unusual trio before her. The Keylarian queen who had led her people through the war, the princess who had returned from the dead, and the human officer who had chosen to stand with them. This goes against every protocol we have, she finally said. But so did Orbiteka's manipulation of our governments. She straightened, decision made. I'll authorize a special operations team to rendezvous with your forces at the following coordinates. Let's show Orbitek that their divide-and-conquer strategy has failed. As the transmission ended, Zara turned to the assembled Keylarian officers, many of whom looked deeply uncomfortable with what had just transpired. I understand your reservations, she told them. For generations, we have viewed humans as adversaries. But true strength lies not in clinging to old hatreds, but in recognizing when circumstances require new approaches. She gestured to Lynthia and Marcus. My daughter and her human mate have shown us that cooperation is possible. Now we must build upon that foundation, not out of idealism, but out of practical necessity. Orbitek sought to divide us for profit. We will unite for survival. Commander Telvok stepped forward. I will personally lead the Keylarian contingent of this joint operation, Your Majesty. If Princess Lynthia and Marcus Vale trust these humans, that is sufficient for me. One by one, the other officers voiced their support, some enthusiastically, others with clear reservations but professional dedication to duty. As the tactical chamber emptied, military personnel hurrying to prepare for the unprecedented joint mission, Zara found herself alone with Lynthia and Marcus once more. This is just the beginning, Lynthia said quietly. Even if we succeed against the Remex, dismantling Orbiteka's entire operation will take years. Then we will take years, Zara replied with determination. One step at a time. She turned to Marcus. You will represent both Keylarian and human interests in this operation. An unusual position for anyone, but perhaps fitting for someone who has already bridged our worlds in a more personal capacity. Marcus inclined his head respectfully. I'm honored by your trust, Your Majesty. And I promise you, I will do everything in my power to prove it justified. See that you do, Zara said, though her tone held none of the coldness it had just days earlier. My daughter chose you, against all convention and probability. I begin to understand why. With that, she departed, leaving Lynthia and Marcus briefly alone in the tactical chamber. Did your mother just give us her blessing? Marcus asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Lynthia's membrane shimmered with amusement. Not quite, but it's a start. A week ago, she believed me dead and you an enemy. Progress comes in small steps. Marcus took her hand, human fingers intertwining with Keylarian. We've spent 10 years collecting evidence, hiding in shadows, fighting to be believed. Now we're planning joint military operations and diplomatic relations. It's almost too much to process. This is what we fought for, Lynthia reminded him. The chance to end the cycle of manipulation and conflict, to build something new. And after, Marcus asked, if we succeed, what then? I'm not exactly suited for court life, and you're still a princess of the Empire. Lynthia's expression grew thoughtful. Perhaps we'll be needed as ambassadors. Who better to bridge our worlds than those who've lived in both? Or perhaps we'll finally have the chance to simply live, without running, without hiding. Before Marcus could respond, an alert sounded, summoning them to the preparation briefing for the joint mission. The future with all its complications and possibilities, would have to wait. For now, there was work to be done, a conspiracy to dismantle, and perhaps the foundations of peace to be laid. The stars seemed particularly bright over Zalaris as the joint Keylarian-Human Strike Force returned from their mission 3 days later. The operation had succeeded beyond expectations. All 6 Remex infiltration vessels neutralized, their crews captured, their mission parameters and Orbitech connections documented and verified by both human and Keylarian intelligence services. In the Great Hall of the Palace, before an assembly of the Empire's highest officials and a small delegation from the Human Alliance, Queen Zura stood on the ceremonial platform, her royal armor gleaming in the light of the ancient crystal chandeliers. Beside her stood Admiral Chun, the human military leader looking somewhat uncomfortable but determined in the alien surroundings. Today marks a turning point, Zara announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. For the first time in generations, Keylarians and humans have fought side by side rather than against one another. Together, we have struck a blow against those who would profit from our mutual destruction. Admiral Chun stepped forward. The Human Alliance acknowledges and appreciates the Keylarian Empire's initiative in sharing vital intelligence. Our joint success proves what can be achieved through cooperation rather than conflict. Murmurs rippled through the assembled dignitaries, some approving, others clearly skeptical. Centuries of enmity could not be erased by a single mission, no matter how successful. At Zara's signal, Lynthia and Marcus entered the hall, both bearing the marks of recent combat, but walking tall. They had led the Joint Strike Team, their unique combination of skills and knowledge proving decisive in the operation's success. Princess Lynthia, Zara called out formally, "Approach with your companion." As they climbed the steps to the ceremonial platform, Zara could see exhaustion in their movements, but also pride and determination. They had risked everything, not once but repeatedly, for this moment. "The Empire owes you a debt," Zara continued when they stood before her. "Your persistence in uncovering the conspiracy against us, your courage in returning despite the dangers, and your leadership in this joint operation have all served Keylarian interests with the highest distinction." She turned slightly toward Marcus. "And you, Marcus Vale, have demonstrated loyalty and commitment to a cause not your own, at great personal risk. Such actions cannot go unrecognized." From a ceremonial box held by Commander Telvok, Zara withdrew 2 medallions, each bearing the intertwined symbols of the Keylarian royal house. "These are the medallions of imperial service, not bestowed since before the war," she explained, placing one around Lynthia's neck and, in a move that caused gasps throughout the hall, the other around Marcus's. "They recognize those who have rendered extraordinary service to the Empire, regardless of origin." Admiral Chen's eyes widened slightly at this unprecedented honor being granted to a human, but she nodded approvingly. "Furthermore," Zara continued, "I hereby appoint Princess Lynthia and Marcus Vale as special envoys to the Human Alliance, with full diplomatic authority to establish a framework for ongoing cooperation between our peoples." This announcement created a much larger stir, with some of the more conservative court members visibly bristling. Zara silenced them with a single imperious glance before continuing. "Orbitech's conspiracy has been exposed, but their influence remains deeply embedded in both our societies. Rooting it out will require sustained cooperation and trust, qualities embodied by these 2 individuals who have already bridged our worlds." Lynthia stepped forward, her membrane shifting to formal royal purple. "We accept this honor and responsibility, Your Majesty, and we pledge to serve both Keylarian and human interests with equal dedication." "The Human Alliance welcomes this appointment," Admiral Chen added, "and will assign appropriate diplomatic counterparts to work with your envoys." As the formal ceremony concluded and the assembly broke into smaller groups for discussion, Zara gestured for Lynthia and Marcus to join her in a more private alcove off the main hall. "This appointment serves multiple purposes," she told them quietly. It gives you official standing to continue your work against Orbitech, provides diplomatic protection for your unusual union, and removes you from direct court politics while opinions adjust. Marcus smiled slightly. Practical as always, Your Majesty. A queen must be practical, Zara replied, though her expression softened. But a mother may also wish for her daughter's happiness, even when it comes in unexpected forms. Lynthia's membrane flushed with emotion. Mother, there will be time for personal matters later, Zara interrupted, though not unkindly. For now, our focus must remain on the larger threat. Orbitech's reach extends far beyond what we've uncovered so far, and they will not surrender their profits or power without a fight. We're prepared for that fight, Marcus assured her. We've been preparing for 10 years. Zara studied him for a moment. This human who had saved her daughter, fought alongside her, loved her despite everything that should have made such a connection impossible. Perhaps there was wisdom to be found in their example. The path ahead will not be easy, she cautioned. There are many in both our societies who prefer hatred to understanding, who will resist any effort at reconciliation. And Orbitech will use that resistance to further their aims. Nothing worthwhile is ever easy, Lynthia replied. But we've accomplished the impossible already. We exposed the conspiracy. We initiated cooperation between our species, and she glanced at Marcus with her membrane glowing warmly. We found something precious amid all the destruction. Zara nodded, a decision crystallizing in her mind. There is one more announcement I intend to make before the Human Alliance delegation departs. One that will cause considerable controversy, but perhaps provide a powerful symbol for our new direction. Later that evening, as the twin moons of Zalaris rose over the palace, Queen Zara stood once more before the assembled dignitaries and human representatives. The Great Hall had been transformed for the occasion. Ancient ceremonial artifacts brought from the vaults, luminescent blossoms from the royal gardens arranged in elaborate patterns. Throughout our history, Zara began, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. The Kilarian Empire has marked moments of significant transition with formal ceremony. Today, we stand at such a crossroads. She gestured, and Lynthia and Marcus entered the hall once more, now attired in formal ceremonial garments that blended elements of both Kilarian and human design, an integrated aesthetic that somehow honored both traditions while creating something new. 10 years ago, Princess Lynthia and Marcus Vale formed a union according to their own private covenant, without formal recognition from either of our societies. Today, I intend to change that. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the hall as the implication became clear. Admiral Chen leaned toward one of her aides, whispering rapidly, "As Queen of the Kilarian Empire, I hereby formally recognize the union between Princess Lynthia and Marcus Vale, according it all rights and privileges of a royal marriage under imperial law." Zara's voice was firm, brooking no disagreement despite the shocked expressions on many Kilarian faces. Lynthia and Marcus stood before her, their surprise evident. This had not been part of the planned ceremony. Furthermore, Zara continued, I invite our Human Alliance guests to consider whether similar recognition might be extended under human law as a symbol of our new cooperation. Admiral Chen stepped forward after a brief consultation with her colleagues. While I lack the authority to make such a determination immediately, I can state that the Alliance will give this matter priority consideration at the highest levels. The symbolic importance is not lost on us, as Zara led the ceremonial blessing of a union, combining ancient Kilarian traditions with elements of human ritual that Marcus quietly suggested. She observed the reactions throughout the hall. Some are clearly appalled, others curious, a few quietly supportive. Change would not come easily or quickly to either society. Yet as the ceremony concluded and Lynthia and Marcus sealed their union with the formal touching of foreheads in Kilarian tradition and the clasping of hands in human custom, Zara felt something she had not expected, a sense of rightness, of possibility, of hope for a future different from the past. Later, as the reception continued and the formal tensions gradually eased, Zara found a moment alone with her daughter and her new, officially recognized son-in-law. "You surprised us," Lynthia said quietly. "This wasn't what we expected when you spoke of an announcement." The best diplomatic maneuvers often involve an element of surprise, Zara replied with a hint of a smile. "But beyond politics, it was overdue. What you two have built together deserves recognition." Marcus bowed slightly. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I know this wasn't an easy decision." "Few important decisions are ever easy," Zara observed. "But sometimes they are necessary. You and Lynthia represent something our peoples need now more than ever. Proof that cooperation and understanding are possible, even between those raised to be enemies." She glanced across the hall, where human and Kularian diplomats were engaged in cautious but genuine conversation. "This is just the beginning of a long and difficult process. There will be setbacks, resistance, perhaps even violence from those who cannot accept change. Orbitech and their allies will continue to work against us. But today, at least, we have taken the first step toward a different future." Lynthia's membrane glowed with emotion. "When we began our journey 10 years ago, hiding in the borderlands, piecing together fragments of evidence, I never imagined it would lead to this. I hoped only to expose the truth, perhaps prevent another war. And instead, you may have helped lay the foundation for lasting peace," Zara said softly. "Though that work has only just begun." As the celebration continued around them, Lynthia and Marcus exchanged a glance that communicated volumes without words. The shared understanding of two people who had faced death together, uncovered conspiracy together, and now faced the even more daunting challenge of building bridges between worlds that had known only enmity for generations. It would not be easy. The wounds of war ran deep. The manipulations of Orbitech extended far into both societies, and change always faced resistance. But as they looked out over the unprecedented gathering of humans and Kularians, engaged in cautious but genuine dialogue, they allowed themselves to feel something that had been in short supply during their decade of exile: hope. And in the center of it all stood Queen Zura, who had lost a daughter to war and found her again through the most unlikely of alliances. She had begun this day as a ruler, defending her empire against conspiracy, and ended it as an architect of a potential peace that few could have imagined possible. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with obstacles and dangers, but for the first time in many years, it also held promise. As the twin moons of Zalaris rose higher in the night sky, casting their silver light through the crystal dome of the Great Hall, they illuminated something unprecedented in the ancient chamber. Humans and Kularians, former enemies, raising glasses together in a tentative toast to a shared future. And at the center of it all, a princess thought lost to war and the human who had saved her, their unlikely love having sparked a revolution that neither had fully intended, but both had helped create. The war had taken much from both their peoples, but perhaps, in the end, it had also created the possibility for something new to emerge from the ashes, something neither Kularian nor human alone, but a synthesis of both, stronger for its diversity, richer for its complexity, and perhaps, in time, capable of healing wounds that had once seemed eternal.